get a true representation even of that risk until people are allowed to take it. With an informed decision and complete consent, you cannot ever assess a proper perception of the risk without allowing people to go for VBACs. You can't ever say VBACs aren't good if you never allow it. Like, it's baffling.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm Tracy Donegan. Today I'm speaking with Lisa Campbell as she describes her experiences of preparing for a vaginal birth after 2 cesareans. We'll discuss why it was important to Lisa and how she navigated some of the challenges she met along the way. You'll also hear about Lisa's experiences of the new walking epidural available now at the Coombe. Now I bring you Lisa Campbell. Hi everybody, you're very welcome to my next edition of the Tracy Donegan podcast, and I would like to welcome Lisa Campbell today. Lisa is going to talk to me a little bit about her experiences of having, she's had 2 babies in the UK, and her most recent baby was born in the Coombe in Dublin. And we're going to talk a little bit about her experiences of going for VBAC in Ireland, what that means, some of the challenges that moms are being faced with, and but I'm thrilled to have you here, Lisa. I'm looking forward to hearing all about your journey and how it ended. So you're very welcome. So tell us a little bit about your first experiences of labor.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I feel like I researched VBAC a lot, so I would be no mean an expert, but I certainly was very, very invested in this as a course for me. But so my first experience, my first pregnancy was she was born in 2018, and like you said, was in the UK, and we got to 42 weeks. I was brand new to the whole process. I was in hospital for about 3 days where they were trying every which way but loose to make her come out. So there was, did all of the pessary gels. Then they did the Pitocin and tried that. That didn't trigger anything. And I just kind of thought this was the way to go. Now, I tried everything personally myself to make her come out. So I hired a private midwife. I was going to acupuncture. I did everything but the castor oil. I stopped there now, but I did everything myself because I was getting to 42 weeks and I thought, oh my God, I really do. I'm excited to get her here. And I do remember the private midwife. I always think back to this. She said, don't go for an induction now. And I said to my husband, I was like, that was a very odd thing for her to say. I've never thought that you couldn't go for an induction. I thought this was just the way you go. People are telling you come in for induction and they book you in and that's it. So, with the beauty of hindsight, I would have approached that pregnancy completely different. I think that would have changed my trajectory with birth experiences from then on. It comes with a level of sadness because you think, I wish I just felt more empowered or informed about what choices I had as part of that process. But anyway, so we got to about 3 days in. At the very last knockings, it was 10 o'clock at night, and we went for a C-section with her, and she arrived safe well. And that was all great. She was born healthy, and again, I think she just was brought out too early. I know I was 42 weeks, but she wasn't a big baby. There was no issues with me. So again, hindsight and all that. And then fast forward to 2020 was my second daughter, and I actually had gone for a VBAC with her as well. So I was brought in to be induced, and I was a bit more ballsy because I'd done a bit more research about VBACs, and I was, really kind of gung-ho, but not done a whole lot of research, but knew it was an option and knew that it felt like a safer option for me rather than surgery, which seems to be much more of a default than a serious undertaking. So I went in and they said, we're going to induce you. And I said, I refuse induction. I do not want to be induced again. Please leave me alone. And I went in and told them this, and they're obviously a bit uppity about it. But I said, look, I'm happy to be monitored, but I don't want to be induced. So I went home, and then I was brought back in and they said, great, we're just going to bring you over to the delivery suite just to have you checked over. And I was waiting about 11 hours, and I just got out of the bed and I said, I'm going home. I am exhausted. I do not want to go into delivery right now by any means, because I'm not ready and I'm just exhausted. So my husband was very jittery at this point, because of course they make you sign the scary form, don't they? They make you sign this form that says, your baby, that your baby could die, essentially, is what you're signing. They will say anything to get you to stay there. And I was like, look, she's fine on the monitor. I'm happy that I feel fine. So let's come back tomorrow. And then the next morning I did go into labour myself. I woke up with some contractions and I thought, great, this is brilliant. I'm going into labour myself. I was on the 42 weeks again. They were very nervous about me being quite late. I hadn't dilated. I got I hadn't got much progression really, but I was like, great, okay, brilliant. And then again, it comes down to kind of not knowing. My labour stalled after about 6 or 7 hours, which is probably normal because you're in prodrominal labour or whatever it's called. So I thought, oh Christ, maybe something is going wrong. And I kind of did start to doubt myself. And I knew in my head, if I go in, they're not gonna let me leave. They're just gonna do everything they can. And of course I did go in. I thought, look, I'm just going in to be checked. I want to make sure she's fine. And I sat there for a couple of hours, and at one point there was a dip in her heart rate. Not a serious dip, but it was that little bit too long. And they, of course, rushed me over, like blue lights galore, and brought me over to the delivery suite. And gave me the whole spiel about, this could be a sign. And I said, doesn't it kind of go up and down anyway? It can take a minute to recover. Like, it's not always a sign of distress. Yeah, that's true. But they coupled it with the 42 weeks. And I totally get 42 weeks kind of a bit of a marker for some. But I was kind of basing it on my original daughter. I was like, look, I feel like all my babies are late. Like, I feel like it's a thing for me that my babies just take their time, and actually they're not big babies, they're not overcooked, they're just taking a little bit longer. But of course they said, right, we'll break your waters. Now this again happened at my first pregnancy. We'll break your waters and that should speed up labour. And I thought, okay, it didn't happen with my first, but maybe it'll happen with this one, because I feel like you break your waters and there's no going back. Like, you can't go home really, because I know that there's risks with that, and I find it a very serious intervention. And had I known my own body back then, I would have known that doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't speed up labour at all. It makes absolutely no difference. So anyway, they did break the waters, and they found like a very small bit of meconium, but of course they were very nervous about it. And they said, if you don't progress in an hour, we're going to C-section you. And I was like, oh, frig it anyway. So I got onto my sister and my husband. I was crying. I was like, I really want this VBAC. I really don't want to go for I don't want a C-section again. But I coupled it with the 42 weeks, and just I didn't want to risk it because of the dip in our heart rate. Had it been the same with my first daughter, I wouldn't have been so nervous, but I was just trying to couple it all, and I went for it anyway. And then fast forward to my third birth, and I was like, this is the ironclad of commitments. I am going for this. I researched to the nth degree about VBACs, VBAC 2s, how many people in Ireland have gone for VBAC 2s, who are doctors that support this, because I knew nothing about the Irish maternity system either. So it was a huge learning curve for us, which, it's not hugely different from the UK, but it does have quite a lot of differences in terms of healthcare. So I did a lot of research about hospitals, who's got good doctors that support VBACs, and kind of just will, give me that, support and encouragement to go for it. And I certainly had a lot of conversations with people in the Coombe, and I had great support from a lot of people there. So there's midwives over there that are just really fantastic. Like, I'd never had such a close and supportive, like, community in there, certainly on the midwife side and the consultant side, that really do want to kind of promote this. I had a midwife there, Paula Barry, Nora, I can't remember her second name, and she printed off articles for me about how VBACs are great, and what the pros and cons and all that sort of stuff. And it was great, and I'd already done a lot of research, but it was great to have that acknowledgement as well. And she also supported me in I was a bit of a pain in the bum over there, because I went in and I said, look, I assume I need to be a consultant because I've had C-sections before. I met with my consultant. I said, look, I've picked a consultant I know is supportive of VBACs. And they said, oh, well, he hasn't got any space in his clinic, but we'll put you with this guy. They were like, oh, he's very young and progressive and etc. You know, I'm sure he'd be very supportive. Anyway, we got into it, and I just really didn't feel like he was overly supportive of a VBAC 2, because, you know, he was saying, we've never done VBAC 2s. And I was like, I know for a fact you've done VBAC 2s. I know there are people I've spoken to that have done them. So I know that's not true. So there was a few stats he was kind of throwing out that was kind of making me like, that doesn't seem very right. And I was kind of challenging him. And anyway, it was a very difficult process, but ultimately I said, look, I'm really sorry. It's nothing got to do with you, but I'd really like to change consultant because I'd like to be with somebody who supports my views, and it's just a bit of an easier process.
Hey there, if you're enjoying this conversation and are passionate about evidence-based care in labour, the best way to support our work is to subscribe and share this episode with other amazing women in your life. Your support is so important to us and helps us reach more mothers with empowering content. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button and spread the love.
And it kind of felt like a very awkward conversation. And Nora was very supportive. She said, I can come in and sit with you if you want to. Because I was like, obviously this COVID situation, like my husband couldn't be there. I just felt very vulnerable in not being able to like have this kind of confrontation with somebody that, you know, was kind of in that position. It was very awkward. I certainly didn't enjoy being having to do that. But ultimately what happened was, about, I think it was November or December, my daughter was due in February. I did agree with him that I could meet this other consultant, Hugh Connor Senior. I don't know if I can mention names, but he was the consultant that I wanted to go with. And he said, look, meet with him. I'm sure he'll say all the same things I'm saying, but at least it'll give you peace of mind. And I met with him and I said, I'm going to be honest with you. I'd really like to be under your clinic. And I've been asking since I conceived this baby that I wanted to be under your care. Grand, that's no problem. I'll just change this name and that'll be it. I was like, oh my God, that is just, you won't believe the heartache I have just had for the last few months trying to get this very simple thing changed.
Wow.
Oh, and I was very clear. I was like, it's no reflection on the previous consultant, but I just know that you have physically been with people who have had VBACs, and that this is really important to me. And he was absolutely fantastic. Now, again, I've had very vanilla pregnancies. I've had no issues during my pregnancies. Nothing, you know, I could almost not go to the appointments because they're just kind of a tick box. I go in and like, yeah, you're still pregnant. Yeah, you're still fine. And off I go. So, you know, it's an hour to drive from my house up to the Coombe, but I was like, I'll go, and, you know, I know it's all fine, which is great. And he was the very same. You're fine. Just, you know, continue doing what you're doing. I don't need to check you even, you know, I won't do an examination, because he was very open about, you know, do you want an examination? No, you're fine. Then, you know, that's fine. So he was really, really good. And I think that contributed to the empowerment for me about feeling like my body was able to go to have a VBAC too. Like, I really thought this is going to be it. I was telling everybody and their wife that this was a thing for me, and I'm going to get this. I know I can do it. And then, luckily enough, with my third daughter, I thought I'm going to go to 42 weeks again. Didn't go as far this time. On her due date, or just before her due date, I went into labour myself. And I was in labour for about 3. So every night I went into labour all night. A lot of contractions, and then stopped the next day. And I'm sure that would have gone on for a fair amount of time. But we started to time them on the third day. The third night even, let's say, and they were very regular, but they weren't getting more intense or more close together. And of course, I've never been in labour before, so I was like, I don't know. We're at 5 every 5 minutes. So my husband was like, yeah, that's the magic number. Let's go. So we trek on up to the Coombe, and we are kind of assessed, but very quickly admitted. Now, in hindsight, I was admitted at 2 to 3 centimetres. And of course, if I wasn't going for a VBAC, and I hadn't had sections before, I'm sure I would have just been sent home, because you're in early labour. Come back to us when you got a bit more going on. But of course, because of the sections, I'm sure that was the reason I was admitted. in hindsight, again, I thought, great, I'll get in, I'll get some pain relief, I'll be able to sleep, I'll be able to rest. I've got my water, I've got my environment, I've got candle, like the flameless candles here. I've got, all of my positive affirmations. I've got everything here, food, everything ready to go. And I thought, great, all I need is to get in, get some pain relief, get some rest, and just see how we go. Now, we obviously got in and I got assessed and I was on the gas and air and that was going great. No issues with baby. And I was under the care of a consultant largely. I never got examined by a midwife. But I got examined by consultants only, really. When they came in, they did the examinations. The first consultant I actually had a really traumatic experience with her, and I actually never saw her again. But I felt like I wish I had a bit more gusto to say I don't ever want to see her again. She had extremely aggressive examination, and I cried out in pain and had a cry when she finished. And I was absolutely traumatized by it. I've never had such an experience in my whole life. I think she was trying to do a sweep and to properly try and progress this labor. So I get maybe her intentions were good, but it was gut wrenching. I could feel it in my throat. It was just horrendous. So that really kind of shook me because I thought, oh my God, this is becoming really too involved. But I was exhausted by this point. I hadn't slept for days, and I was getting very tired. So they were mentioning C-section right from the get-go. Really, we would recommend that you would consider a C-section. I said, please don't, I'm absolutely fine, baby's fine. Unless there's an acute medical need, I do not want to have a C-section. I'd like to just continue. I'm happy to be monitored continuously with the wireless monitoring. Now, to their credit, about early morning, so I went in about 2 a.m. This was about 8 or 9 a.m. They were examining me. They said, oh, we can break your waters. And I was like, oh God, here we go again. And they said, right, well, but because you're in labor, this might jumpstart further. And I was like, I think this all the time. I always think this is going to do something, and it never does. They were like, okay, we're going to break your waters, and it's going to hit you like a ton of bricks. She was really gearing me up. You're really going to get this intense pain now in a minute, and it's going to and I was like, oh my God, this is going to be horrendous. I was really getting freaked out. Nothing, of course, happened. Absolutely nothing happened. And I just sat and waited, and nothing happened. Hours went by and nothing happened. Now, I was continuing to progress, but very slowly. And when you look back, I guess I started from 2, and you can be at 2 for weeks. You could be at 2 for such a long time. It's not an indication that your labor isn't progressing, because I could have been at home for weeks, continuing to wait to move up. But of course, there was interventions, and I was progressing. I was just going very slowly. So I moved up to a 3, and then there was a 4, and she was starting to move down, and I was like, great, okay. And they did. To be fair to the consultant, she said, look, we have a new study that they're introducing here at the Clune, which is called a walking epidural, and it means that we give you a low dosage epidural, which means you can still walk around, but you get the relief. I was like, that sounds amazing.
Tell me all about this. I want to hear all about this walking epidural.
Oh my God, I told everybody and their wife. I told my friend who loves epidurals all of her births. I was like, if you can get it, because it's a game changer. And I hope that they roll this out across the whole nation, because it is just magic. It was obviously you'd still need somebody there, in case you kind of you don't have full use to your legs, but you can stand, you can walk. So I could walk to the bathroom, I could go and sit on the wall, I could go and sit on a chair, I could walk around a little bit. It was incredible. It really, really was. Now, they have to continue to come in and top you up every 90 minutes. So that's a drawback for them. It's quite a lot of manpower to obviously have to maintain that. But the relief was incredible. Just like a normal epidural, just felt no pain at all. And, they were excellent at siting the epidural. I had huge issues in the UK siting the epidural, but he brought in with a little scanner thing. Really, really excellent. Rated that incredibly well. And I think that gave me a lot of time to be able to kind of rest. Now, I felt like the one thing that didn't happen was I did not rest properly. I don't feel like I was kind of left alone to really sleep. And of course, I asked a few times, could I eat? Again, not. I think they had C-section in their minds. They're like, we're not going to feed you, because obviously they don't like feeding you before C-sections. So that didn't really happen either. So I really started to get tired, and by about 3 o'clock, I could feel that there was more pressure, and I was like, oh, this is great. And I was telling them, I can feel pressure. I feel like things are moving. Now the consultant then did come in about 5 o'clock, and she said, oh, you haven't progressed. It's still about a 5, like maybe a 6. And by this point, I was so exhausted. I really thought, that's bad news. She's gonna keep going for me for the C-section. And I was just distraught. I was inconsolable. And I just felt very vulnerable, like really, really upset and vulnerable. And my husband was obviously exhausted as well. The two of us were upset. And I felt very awkward, because they continued to sit there rather than kind of give us a few minutes to, think about what we want to do. Because I looked up expecting that they'd have left the room and given us a bit of privacy, but they're all still sitting there. I was like, oh my God, I can't argue anymore. I have no fight left in me to argue for this, what is clearly what I really want. Like, there was no again, I went back to my thing, there was no acute medical need, but I just have no more fight in me. And it's so sad to think that your default is major surgery. Like, that's what your default is. Like, I'll go for major surgery because I just can't argue anymore. And it's a real shame, because I look back and I think I totally could have gone there. If I had had the right, somebody really looking out for me and said, you know what, all you need is a good rest and a bit of food, and you can go the whole way. Like, it might take you a little bit longer, but you will get there. And without that support, and that's no reflection on my husband, because he was absolutely wrecked as well, being up the same time as much as he was. But I think back and think, we had considered a doula, and I thought, you know what, I've got all this information, I feel really empowered, I feel really knowledgeable, I feel like I know what to say when I want to push back. But I never took into account how tired I'd be, and how much I just couldn't argue anymore. I just felt like I was arguing, and it was taking so much energy out of me. And it's a huge regret. And I went to, after the birth, after my first birth, I had quite a long period of postnatal, like, anxiety, and bouts of depression, like really just low and very anxious. Anxiety was the biggest piece. And after this birth, I thought it was going to be the same, and it really wasn't. But I did go to a birth reflections clinic in the Coombe, and I got very upset again, just trying to talk through my experience. And she was like, I'm so sorry, I wish you could go away happy. I was like, I don't think I'll ever be happy by that birth. I just feel like I wish I'd gone private. I wish it was a lot of things. I wish I'd a doula. I wish I'd gone private with my doctor, because I knew he would have been there, and he would have advocated for me. And it's a shame that you have to rely on certain individuals to get that support, rather than it just being a given that this is a person's body doing what they need to do. This isn't a medical procedure, and the focus is just so skewed on medicalizing this process, when actually it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this difficult. It's just, people are individuals, and they're going to do their own thing in their own time. And it's a terribly vulnerable situation to be in. There's nothing else like it. There's nothing else like it in the world in terms of an experience in your life. But again, you're also incredibly vulnerable. It's a whole thing. But so that's my story. And I'd love to go back in time. I would love to go back and say to myself, get a doula. And and it goes to also not knowing the maternity system in Ireland. Like, what's the pros and cons with getting a private consultant versus being a public patient? I'd kind of done a lot of research on it, as much as I could, based on kind of people's perceptions and reading up on it. But other than the cost, I couldn't fully put my finger on, this is why I would spend thousands of euro on a private consultant. But looking back, I do think, I do wonder, would it have been different? if he had been there as a private consultant for me. But yeah, I mean, I've never used a doula before, but it's just having that kind of, person in your corner that could recognize, you know what, you remember, you really don't want to have this. Now think about all the things that you said you would do to have a C-section, and what you would need, and have you met that? Like, do you honestly feel comfortable with this? I'm going to look back, and I really think I would have, you know what, you're right, I really don't want to have this section. Like, I'd rather just stay here and lie in this bed. But you kind of feel like you're on a clock, like you're in, they have a schedule, they've got handover at 7 o'clock, and this is 5 o'clock, and they don't really want to hand you over because they've already handed you over once, and they start to get a bit jittery about, you've been here a long time and there's lots of people in the waiting room, and I get there's logistics, I totally do. But you then start to feel a bit like a nuisance, like, oh God, I have been here a long time and maybe I should go home. Oh, I can't go home. Okay, right. Well, then you start to feel a bit awkward. So yeah, there's always been that in my mind everywhere I've gone, even the UK, feeling like you're kind of taking a bed and you just don't inconvenience them.
It's very common, that, I think anyone going through, especially in your first baby, that you trust everybody else and you feel like, you're in the system and everyone knows more than you, and they, we want to trust the experts, but the lack of individualized care, and particularly in Ireland, this way of wearing women down who are planning a VBAC, it almost starts from the first antenatal appointments, that it's like, oh, it's almost like C-section is the default. And, and you raise your hands and say, well, actually, I was thinking about VBAC, it's like, oh, well, and then it's so difficult. And I mean, just your experience of them giving you this news with such a lack of sensitivity, and then sitting in the room, like I can't even, how can anyone in their right mind think that was okay? It's bizarre. There's stories that, you see on the VBAC group of, there was one woman in Kilkenny, I believe, who had, I think she had an issue with the monitoring. She was making an informed decision to have specific monitoring. She had, again, like yourself, done her research, and VBAC moms, I think for any care providers, midwives, obstetricians that are watching this video, VBAC moms, for the most part, do more research than the FBI when it comes to.
They're very passionate about it.
Really, they know, they have looked at more papers than most consultants would in a very long time when it comes to VBAC. They're very current on what is happening in the literature. But to have a situation where it's literally you're fighting from step one. From the first appointment, you're trying to get on that VBAC pathway. But almost every appointment, someone is going to bring up, well, we're going to, because you're seeing different people as well, we're going to schedule you here, or baby's looking too big, so we might need to induce you. And then it's all, it's really frustrating. And especially when we see hospitals calling solicitors and having solicitors involved. When a woman is in labor and you're bringing in solicitors to make her comply, it is just unacceptable. And if you're working in that hospital and you're letting this happen, please help women give birth in a way that is dignified and respectful and sensitive and evidence-based. Even if it does, if the path changes and it has to go a different way, there is a way we can make it better for women, so they're not coming out of this experience with mental health concerns that can impact the rest of their their parenting and how they interact with their kids and their family. We've really have to do better in Ireland and elsewhere as well when it comes to supporting VBAC, and you walk your talk. It's so frustrating. You see so many women going to various different hospitals, and we'll take the Coombe for example, and like your experience, you meet one person and they're like, no, VBAC 2, get out the door, and then it's like you talk to somebody else because again, the group was very well informed. You know, you post any hospital, someone's going to say, oh, yeah, here's who you need to see. You know, and I think consultants should be aware of that as well. That there's a lot of information being shared. And the reason you went to the COOM and chose that particular provider was because of the so many birth stories and so many really positive interactions with that specific consultant. So, and it's just really, sorry, pisses me off that we are still doing this to women. We are not accepting the fact that we have a national consent guideline that I think it must be sitting gathering dust on every maternity unit, labour ward. And there's just simple things like that, understanding the physiology that a woman who is being starved does not have the energy for labour, and you don't have the mental capacity to argue anymore. So it's again, like, if we restrict your food, and we tell you you're not in labour, you're not progressing enough, when you're not even in active labour. Active labour would be considered, 5 to 6 centimetres. So it's just, it's so frustrating. I think doulas can be so helpful within maternity services. We've got to figure out a way to have more doulas available, and to have them available in a way that is affordable for parents, so that they have that extra support on the day, just to as you said, to remind you, but also, just the idea of, eating. You've got to eat. We've got to have some kind of nutrition. I have to say, the walking epidural, absolutely brilliant. I think if we could roll that out around the country, that would be huge.
I really hope it has progressed. Absolutely, I really do, because I really like the consultant did come in and offer this as an option, and it was the first thing that I thought, oh wow, maybe she is on my side. Like, maybe she, it's not all about C-section, and it did it gave me a good boost. I really do think it was a game changer, and I'd love to see that rolled out across every hospital, for every woman to have that option. It's incredible. But even, like you said, to have that choice, like if it does go down a C-section route, I think that there's huge opportunity to review that process, because I've obviously been through 3 C-sections myself. They were all, the people involved really make it. My first C-section was brilliant. I had one of the guys who kind of coordinates the room. He was in the UK. He was like, "What music do you want on? Is there anything that I can do to make this comfortable?" Really nice. The next woman who was in for my second baby, she was quite narky, and I kind of said, I was getting quite antsy because she was taking quite a long time to bring my daughter over to me. And I said it to my husband. He brought her over, and she got really narky. She was like, "Oh, well, she's coming, yes." And I was like, bloody hell, this is the birth of my child. Like, and then I told this now, and I said, look, if I'm going for a C-section with this third, these are the things that I do not want to happen. And she said, we can explore a gentle cesarean. And I'd heard about gentle cesarean. I was like, wow, I didn't even come up with this. Like, that sounds great. Should we could lower the drape, and you can like simulate kind of pushing her out, which felt very weird. I felt like they were I felt like it wasn't paying lip service, but I don't know what the right term is. It just felt like they were doing it to placate me, and I was like, this is not the same. Like, and I feel like it's I know it's positive kind of simulation, but for me personally, it felt a bit odd, and I'd rather just, not pretend like I'm actually pushing her out, because I know I'm not. Like, it's not the same. But equally, like I said, I've been separated from my baby after she was born, and I really would not want that to happen. Like, I want her on me as soon as possible. And the consultant said, yeah, we can put her straight on you. But the midwife then jumped in. She's like, no, the pediatrics need to see her first. And I was like, right, okay, that's a very odd. I wouldn't expect consultants to be saying this and midwives to be saying that. And I was like, right, okay, well, this is a big deal for me. I feel like I was separated from my daughters for a long time before I got to see them. And luckily, my husband actually, he GoPro'd all of the babies that were born. And for my third, it was nearly 8 minutes I was waiting, which doesn't sound like a long time. But when your baby's born, you're lying there cut open. 8 minutes feels like a lifetime. It was the longest time. And I even shouted out in the operating room. I was like, where is my baby? Why can't I see her?
Yeah.
And they were like, she's coming. And my husband was like, I was videoing her, and all she was doing was measuring her head and, you know, doing this, that, and the other. There was nothing medical they were doing with her. Nothing they couldn't have done half an hour later. There was nothing pressing about what they were doing. And they were faffing. Oh, the head thing fell off. Let's do that again. And my husband was like, she's waiting over there and she's frantic to see her baby. And, you know, she was like, yeah, we're going as fast as we can. I was like, no, you weren't. No. And it was so distressing. I remember when my baby was actually put on me, I kind of just felt like sad, because I was like, that should have been a magical moment, but you've just ruined it, because whatever you were doing over there, there was no thought about what this is meaning for me, even though I said it. And equally in the UK, the last thing I'll say about C-section is, in the UK, once your baby's with you, she is kept with you. You take her to the bathroom, like you go everywhere with her. But in Ireland, once your baby's born, after a little while, they take, you know, her and dad then are brought up to recovery, and you lie there on your own in the operating room while they sew you up, and it's a good half hour just on your own. And I'm like, why is he not here? I don't understand why that he has to go. That just threw me as well, because I wasn't expecting it. Having had them both first ones in the UK, I wasn't expecting to be separated from her at all. And that was really hard, because obviously I'm sitting there and they're talking about their holidays and their, you know, this, that, and the other, and what they're doing at the weekend. And I just was like, this is so difficult. This whole experience just is not what I expected, even as a default option, which for me a C-section was, to then be left with also these things that just didn't meet my expectations, or just didn't have me in mind at all. I get, I'm another number, I'm another, you know, C-section to process in, do the bits, get done, and out you go. But it was, and I sent them a big long email afterwards saying I would hope that you would review this entire C-sections, because like, it was an essay that this was traumatic, and luckily I have not had any residual impact from it, like my first pregnancy where I was months with anxiety and depression. But it really could, for anyone else, this could have been such a triggering episode following what was probably quite a long process of labor, and then to have major surgery, and just to be treated like just a slab. And, you know, this connection with your baby was just secondary. You know, I already forgot the fact that I feel when you have a vaginal birth, there's lots of, you know, this hormonal and chemical reactions that happen that doesn't happen with a C-section. So I've already forgot that, but then to go that one step further and feel like I'm just a slab in an operating room. So I'd hope that would be reviewed as well, because the whole approach to C-section was just, it wasn't great. So yeah, I would hope that would be reviewed as well. Because, say that again?
Sorry, did they respond to your email?
No, I actually never did get a response. No. I did mention in my birth reflections clinic the same information. I went through everything. I had a little list of all the things I wanted to say, and I did write it out in email. And she did encourage me to email. But I was surprised to not have heard anything back, or at least an acknowledgement that, you know, they would look into it. And I just felt like maybe I'm only one person. Maybe nobody writes to them. And they got one email and they're like, okay, we'll park that. We've got hundreds of patients that come through our doors, so one complaint. But I don't know. I'd love if people did feel like they could, if they didn't have a good experience, or there was things that they thought improved, that they would also email and say, these, you know, because if they get so many of the same theme, they surely have to take notice. But yeah, nothing back, unfortunately.
That's disappointing, but I'm not surprised. Yeah. Sorry, I'm so sorry that really that was. It could have been such a redeeming experience, and not even. I mean, even without having the VBAC, it could have been such a really positive experience, and all it took really was, a shift in attitude, and to have someone in that room with you, not having every consultant come in to check you, but to treat you normally. I'm a healthy, well woman that's on the journey, to hopefully have a VBAC. Can you treat me like a normal, healthy, well woman, and not like an accident that's waiting to happen? And this constant surveillance is, and I understand that litigation is a huge issue, and everyone is afraid of being sued, and everyone is worried about a bad outcome. But when we look at the data, it's, please, like, if we're watching it, look at the data. Please base your practice on the data. Yeah.
Exactly. Risky. Oh, and you'll never get a true representation even of that risk until people are allowed to take it. With an informed decision and complete consent, you cannot ever assess a proper perception of the risk without allowing people to go for VBACs. You can't ever say VBACs aren't good if you never allow it. Like, it's baffling that it's not, that they can even put so much stock into saying, oh, it's so risky, when actually you're basing that on even if you base it on your own perception, you never allow it. So how could you ever say it's risky? Because you couldn't say, oh, 1 of 10 people who have gone for VBACs have had an issue or a rupture, but you've never allowed any. So, like, how is that even like defendable?
Yeah,
it's just
the uterine rupture,
like, it made me.
And the uterine rupture, scare tactic is rolled out right from the beginning. Your uterus could explode, or one in, what figures I heard this week, 1 in 100 chance of having a uterine rupture, and I'm like, where are they plucking these numbers out of their backsides? And I was saying, for anyone who's got a VBAC appointment in any Irish hospital, forget about Irish hospital, any hospital at all, bring a notebook with you and take notes of what numbers are being cited, because I guarantee you'll go in and meet with another provider next week and they'll have a different number. So are they making them up? Because it's not really confidence inspiring for the women that you serve. So
exactly.
And I just, to go back to that, the separation from your daughter, the midwife in me can see, well, if there was something going on, if this was a cesarean that was, because we thought baby was not doing well, baby wasn't coping well, then getting eyes on baby immediately is really important. But your cesarean was for, what did they diagnose it as? Failure to progress,
the failure really just sits with you forever. You feel like it's a black mark.
Nothing to do with their failure to wait, but let's just blame you. That sticks in my mind as well. That it felt almost punitive that your baby was kept away from you.
It did. It really did. It felt like they were making a point to keep her, and it just felt very flippant. Like, it felt like she didn't acknowledge the fact that I had very clearly said that I was separated from my second daughter. It felt like it was very long, and I really wanted that skin to skin. I wanted to be the first person to touch my baby, and it just wasn't respected. Like, it was like, oh yeah, okay, we hear you, yeah, okay. And obviously, just, they're going to do whatever they're going to do. So what can I do? Like, I'm sitting there with my insides are out. Like, I can't exactly get up and go, I'm taking this one with me. So it's very tough.
Well, you're doing something really important. You're sharing your story. And I think the more women that share these stories, and because it's, as you know from the group, I'm blue in the face saying, listen, please get a doula, get yourself really well informed. I will plug my book always.
I've read it cover to cover. That was my initial like gateway to this whole experience, and especially in Ireland, because I thought, this is the only thing I have that's available around VBACs in Ireland. And it was amazing. So just thank you so much for shedding light on this whole thing. Like after both of my C-sections that I really felt wanted to be VBACs, I'm going to be a doula, and I'm going to help women that really just feel like they want to have VBACs, and just try and ease the whole process. For if I can do it for one woman and she gets a VBAC and she can put her arm up and go, thank God I did it, that would be enough joy for me to know that at least she could do it. Like, fair play. Because you're right, it needs to be more accessible as a service, or something similar. And I'm not saying doula is the answer to everything, but something that resonates, support for women. And yeah, but thank you for that book. Oh, it is, honestly, I read it cover to cover, and I was looking up all the references, and it was, it really inspired this whole passion I had on VBACs and trying to navigate this process in Ireland. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. I have to thank you because I know it's difficult to to get on these video podcasts and share your story, and I go through the whole imposter syndrome and what are people going to think, and but I really do appreciate you coming on and just sharing the reality of what a lot of women in Ireland are going to face if they're considering VBAC. And I think that's important to know right from the beginning, because I'll often say, the journey to VBAC for a lot of moms is an emotionally challenging one, because it's like they put up barriers every single step of the way. If you meet somebody in your appointment that says, brilliant, I'm sure you're going to do great, it's a safe option, and it's just that little nugget can carry you through the rest of the minutiae you're going to be experiencing in Irish maternity services, and the pushback and the lack of consent and the ongoing coercion of women into cesarean or into induction, or just not listening to what women want. And we're not asking for a lot. That's the thing. All we're asking for is evidence-based care, and just leave us alone. Because when you're in the room, you're just bloody interfering. So unless you can sit in the room and yes, do your clinical care, but be the midwife sitting in the corner knitting, I know that's not going to happen, but the expectation of, I'm expecting you're going to have a VBAC and have someone in the room with you that just is confident in you, that believes in you, even if the VBAC doesn't happen, to have those moments of support that someone else believes I can do this, I think is just so bloody important. And we're just doing a shit job of it at the moment. No, I won't say we're all doing a shit job, because I know there are many midwives and plenty of consultants that really do care about moms going for VBAC and are supportive of VBAC, and they really do walk their talk.
They do.
But it's in pockets. You have to really get on that VBAC in Ireland group and ask the questions. Who's going to be supportive? What helped you? Educate yourself as much as you can, because that's all we can do. Stack the odds of things going great, and then there's a point where we have to, okay, it's in the lap of the gods now, so but at least you can come away from it feeling like I did as much as I could, and it didn't happen on the day. But I think when you're coming away from it feeling with regret, I think it's the hardest thing as a new mother, to have regrets about decisions that you've made in pregnancy and birth. I think many of us carry that with us, that that we didn't we didn't speak up, or we didn't change our preferences, and then we end up blaming ourselves for a shitty system. It's not our fault.
Well, like, even when I was talking about VBACs to like family and friends, like they were like, yeah, but as long as the baby's here, okay. And I'm like, but it's not saying like I'm looking back at regret about my baby and her birth and the joy that I felt that she's here. But there's just like this cultural, I guess not ignorance, but like uncertainty about how important this is to women. And it's only once you go through a birth do you really think, God, I really actually felt strongly about this, that, or the other. But, for whatever reason, I was just going along with it because I didn't know what else to do. But it's just like, I felt certainly in my third pregnancy, because I was so gung-ho. I was so, I was telling everyone in my family, I am not having a C-section this time. I want to experience birth, a vaginal birth. And, I know my mother really struggled with it at times, and she really wanted to, she's obviously anxious about making sure that I'm safe and the baby is safe, and that is absolutely valid. But I guess there's also this, unless you've never had it and you don't understand almost what you're missing out, then there's almost like, oh well, don't, it's fine. It's not that big a deal. Like, yeah, baby's born, but it doesn't matter what way they come out. And yes, mechanically that's true. As long as the baby gets here safe and you're here safe, that's fine. But there's so much more to it than that. And there's just this, there's an education piece, I think, as well around that, the importance that's linked to vaginal births and connection with your baby, and the hormonal changes that you go through as part of that whole process, that is just kind of secondary in people's minds, because safety is so important, and obviously safety is important, but I think connection is super important. It has such long reaching implications if you ignore it, and it's only getting worse. It's just C-sections, half the people I know have had babies have had C-sections, and some are obviously I fine with it, don't mind, I was happy to do whatever, but some have come away in the same way, and thinking, God, I didn't even know that I could say, actually, you know what, I'm fine and I don't really want to have a C-section, and can we discuss other options, and what can I do, what if I do nothing, like, can I do nothing, what's the alternatives? Like, you never think to question, you just think they're telling you go for a C-section, and you think, right, oh, let's go then. So it's an education piece, I think, across the whole, across society, as well as this cohort of people who are clearly hugely educated. And I feel super well connected because of this Facebook group. I just felt like there was people there that I couldn't speak to anybody else about. I'm really trying to do this. Does anybody have this information? Like, there's nowhere else I could have gone for that information. You can't Google it. You can't, post it in the newspaper. Like, there's no other way for you to find out people's actual story. It's so powerful. It's really, really helpful.
Yeah. And even I think having access to those birth stories is really important, but just the access to evidence and access to information, which your hospital should be providing. But no, moms have to go to Facebook and rely on a complete stranger, and other women sharing what we know, the evidence, and trying to keep everybody up to date. It's like, it's the hospital's job to do that, but it's not changing anytime soon. But no. Lisa,
but
what would
there at least till
But Lisa, before we wrap up, what if this video is going to be shared widely, and so if you were speaking to some mums today who are really feel strongly about VBAC, what would you suggest to stack the odds for them?
I think the two things that I would, looking back from my most recent pregnancy, and I feel like that was the one where I was most informed, and I felt like I had the most empowerment, I would have written down exactly what my thresholds were. So I'm saying to myself, I do not want a C-section unless it's acute medical need. And I would have physically written that down. And even if I just had a piece of paper, or I gave it to my husband and said, just anytime they mention C-section, read that out to me, so that I can remind myself what it is that I am stepping through when deciding I'm going to go for a VBAC or not. And I would certainly consider what doula options are available. I feel like there is doulas out there, and I'm sure they're all fantastic. I feel like, I don't know how that process works within Irish hospitals, if they're a little bit resistant to having doulas attending births, or how they feel about it. I don't know how that would go down. But I feel like, at least as a minimum, if I had written things down, I wouldn't have to rely on my fuzzy brain and, trying to also help my husband, who I just talk the ear off about. Now, make sure if I do this, like, we're doing this and we're on the same page, and he'll blindly, yeah, I totally get it, whatever you feel is right. But of course he's not going to remember. So I feel like if I had written things down, it would have gone better. It would have gone in a way that I could rely on something without my memory, and also look at doulas. But I mean, I did a tremendous amount of research. I listened to podcasts from all over the world on VBAC stories. I obviously I did a VBAC workshop. I did the workshop within the COOM. I did met with all the midwives. I met with the consultants. Like, I really and some of it was helpful just for me in my own process. It didn't obviously technically make a blind bit of difference, but for me it felt like at least I am really positively making moves to make this happen as best I can. And that's all you can do. I think it's if you can remind yourself. I would wish I kind of reminded myself about the alternatives, like going through that kind of brain decision process, and deciding, like, okay, what are the alternatives, what are the risks, what if I do nothing, and unless I find things better if I write it down and I can read it, and had I done that, it might have been a bit different. But you still have to fight. You still need to have the arguments. Maybe writing it down, just say, look, can you do the brain for me, then you write down with the brain, and maybe it is something like that. But it's a tricky one, I guess, if you're going in and you're clear. I do feel like the consultants were respectful, but of course it depends who you're going to get. And I would also consider private care in my next, if I was to ever get pregnant again. I really would consider it, because I guess I have a perception that it means the consultant is going to be there when you're in labour, and at least I have met with you and you are consistent, like, common denominator in this process, and I have told you everything already. You know exactly how I feel and what exactly I'm looking to achieve, and maybe that would also make a difference. But that's not, it's not an easy process. It's costly, and it's it's not always for women, so it's very tricky. But
it is
researching is just, I think it's the way.
In the research on Irish medical staff, it's very clear that choosing a private consultant is associated with more intervention, more cesareans, and exactly. Part of that is they're working with women having complicated pregnancies. But unfortunately, they're also working with way too many women who are having healthy, normal pregnancies who should be in a midwife's clinic. But what they've, unless, and you'll see me on about this on the Facebook group all the time, unless like, they are 110% VBAC supportive, keep going, stay public. But as you again, you did your research, who the people are. If they're the people, if you can get on their team, great. Otherwise, I would say save your money, get a doula. If you can have both, yeah. But in general, choosing private care, even though you do get that continuity of carer, and they will be checking in on you in labour, they will be responsible for your care, and you have that name, you have that person, that go-to person if anything comes up. But it's a delicate process, nuanced, of knowing who are the VBAC supportive consultants if you're thinking of going private. And then just quickly, would you mind sharing a little bit about your experience at the VBAC class that you took at the COOM? Was it helpful? Did you feel like you got really informed, and was like informed decision making like encouraged around like monitoring and that?
They were. It did. From what I can remember, it was all stuff I knew, because I'd gone through a lady had done a VBAC workshop. I think her name's Neve Cassidy. She was fantastic. She came to our house. We had just moved over from the UK, and that was really powerful because it gave not only me information, which I kind of knew some of, but not all of, but it opened my husband's eyes around VBACs, like things around, one thing that struck out for him was, the reaction, and this happened with he said that exactly happened with you on your second pregnancy. You're stressed, and the stress hormones like repress your body's ability to progress your labor because you're stressed and you're fearful and you can't progress. So he that was a big thing for him. He thought, wow, I never heard it in that way, and it was really powerful. And I attended the VBAC workshop in the CUM, and they were saying a lot of the same stuff, like they were saying all the right things. And it was run by Nora, or else it was Paula. I can't remember who it was run by, but it was very useful, and people were very encouraged to participate and to kind of ask questions. And I felt like it definitely was saying all the right things, but it didn't acknowledge the fact that it kind of depends who you get on the day. Like, we're not saying this as a CUM that you are going to get this care from every single person because they are, soldiers in the machine that are saying all the same stuff. It just depends what consultant they've had, what experiences they've had, and their own kind of biases in a way. So of course, they don't acknowledge that, and it's a shame that there's not. I mean, how can they say it? I suppose out loud, but it is what it is, and it's such a stark reality that is what you're going to be facing. It doesn't matter if you're a first-time mother. Doesn't matter what you bring with you, doesn't matter what sort of environment you set up. If you don't have somebody there that's going to be in your corner, you're kind of on the back foot in a way. Informed and be prepared with your information and what you feel is right for you.
Lisa, thank you so much. This was really, really great. And I do lose the run of myself when we get into the VBAC discussion, because I like that group was running, I think, about 10 or 12 years now, and I'm like, how come we haven't gotten better at this yet? Like, we're still doing the same stuff that we were doing 10 years ago. I did. It's funny. I was at the one and only VBAC national kind of guideline meeting in 2012 in Dublin.
Oh wow!
And it was a fascinating workshop, but there hasn't been one since, so it's obviously not a priority, But it was. Yeah, and it was interesting because some of there were senior consultants who were saying, we need to stop this coercion. We need to stop running women down to theatre when they have a really good opportunity to have a VBAC. And in most cases, we're talking about, again, healthy, well, mom and baby. 70 to 75% of those moms will have a VBAC. About the same percentage who as first-time moms. But we are looking at ridiculously low rates all around the country. And then even if you go to Holles Street, where Holles Street's plan of care for you is VBAC, then they're fiddling around with, breaking the waters, the minute you walk in the door, and the monitoring, more tactics to, push your labor on. Because again, production line model, bed blockers. So I think as women, we need to just don't worry about being a bed blocker. Don't worry about being, the birthzilla or the one who's, the squeaky wheel. Be the bloody squeaky wheel, because it might make a difference in how you're cared for, and sometimes whether VBAC actually happens or not. But thank you, Lisa. It was I
appreciate.
It's been, and I hope this will be not too scary for moms who are sitting there and thinking of going for VBAC and thinking, wow, this is just, I am really opening the door to potentially a lot of stress. And I think that's so important, that mental resilience you need for VBAC. If you're not in a really VBAC supportive unit, it's wearing, and it does wear you down to a point where, you get to 39 weeks and they're thinking, how you feel about VBAC? And you're like, I'm just bloody worn out before labor even starts. So, and so it's so easy then to guide women induction or, yeah. And it's sad that we're still doing it.
It is. It will change though. And if people really do start to come with the information, or we just start to genuinely educate and empower women to make these decisions, I just feel like it will shift. Yeah. It will be slow, but we will. Yeah.
And we have to start asking permission. You know, I'm having a VBAC is an appropriate care plan. You know, I'm planning a VBAC, and I'm not going to ask permission. I'm not going to ask permission to choose a monitoring that is going to be evidence-based. And I think hospitals need to really get used to women now who will have seen this video, who have been members of the VBAC group, who have talked to other women saying, you know what, when we ask nicely, we just get walked all over. So maybe we need to adopt a different that, you know, we have this national consent policy. So I'm not consenting to any of this. So, but of course who wants to have that conversation in labor? That's why, you know, doing all of this, you know, really early on in pregnancy, even before you're pregnant, I think will really stand to you. If you've done a bit of this research, but even before you're pregnant, then you found the provider, you found a unit, hopefully, because there's some parts of the country where VBAC is even more difficult than the Dublin hospitals, you know. So for those women who really don't have any options.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it kind of starts from this, you know, we're empowering women who are first-time mothers before you even get pregnant, before you even have to go for a section. But, you know, where you feel like, actually, you know what? I realize I actually don't have to, you know, like looking back on my first pregnancy and on my first labor, had I known, you know what, you've tried for 3 years and she doesn't want to come out, so maybe I'll just go home for a few days and I'll come back when I'm in labor, or I'll come back every day and be monitored, whatever mitigates your risk, but I don't need to be here. I can just go home. And had I known that, I probably would have gone home, and I just would have said, I'm going to go sleep in my own bed and I will come back when we are in labor, because I don't need to be here. I don't need to go for a C-section. There's nothing wrong with her, nothing wrong with me. So it starts from the start as well. You know, it's a whole piece around labor in general. It's just a shame to have this as a default, but it will change, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think, yeah. And yeah, we need more women, you know, sharing their stories. We need more women complaining, contacting HSE or say, and just so there's a record of it, you know. But it will be interesting to see if anyone follows up after the video is posted. And if they don't, well, that's just another reason to do your own research and educate yourself, and don't rely on the hospital for your VBAC. Really, that's at the end of the day, because do they care? Oh, yeah, who knows?
So
thank
true.
you, Lisa.
Thank you. Take care.
Lisa, how are you? Right, I've stopped that. Okay, that was fabulous. Thank you.
You're welcome. No problem at all. Thank you.
It's such a bloody battle, though. It's just fucking, I don't know.
I know. It's slow going, but yeah, I think it's fundamental.
If you ever think of doula training, let's talk, because
I honestly, I have strongly considered it. I really have been. I've been talking to my husband about it, and I really would love to explore it. You know, I remember I've just been interested in pregnancy since I was a child, and I remember, and even just but as part of this preparation, I was looking at video. Like, there's a really good Instagram, Badass Birther is her name, as her Instagram tag, and she puts loads of videos up about of women who have given birth, obviously given birth vaginally, and it just really helped me visualize the whole process for me, because you get to the point where, like, okay, and then babies, like, you can't really see it happen, unless you actually see it happen. And it was so empowering. It was amazing. So I would definitely say that helped me prepare. Now, obviously, that doesn't work for everyone, because I told my sister about it and she was like, oh God, I don't know if I can watch that. But, you know, for some, it might be a very helpful thing, because, you know, even as a first time mother, like, you've absolutely no idea. Like, you know the mechanics, you know what's going to happen, but you really don't know what it looks like until you see it. And, you know, it sparked my interest, you know, the interest in being a doula and being able to be part of this process. It really is something I'm really strongly interested in, and you know, I'd love to look at it a bit more and see what's possible.
Yeah, it's, now I have to say, with doula work is not easy when you have little ones at home, because you know you can be called out to a birth and you're like an hour to kind of throw your bag in the car and get out of town, you know, kind of thing, and you could be gone for 2 days, you know. But it's lovely work, and it is really satisfying work, but it's also head wrecking work.
I'm sure.
When you're standing in a birth room with staff that are like lying through their teeth to your client, you just have this whole view of humanity that you never expected before, and it's that balancing of, you're going to see a lot of fucking nonsense, and you're going to see some amazing births and redeeming, and just really just seeing women in their power and fucking lifting them up into their power instead of fucking beating them down, which is what Irish maternity services fucking do. Anyway, rant over.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. Let me know if there's anything else that you need from me.
Yeah, no,
but I'll go pick up my kids.
Send me a little bio and a photo, and I'll let you know when it's going out. It'll be probably next month.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much, Tracy. Appreciate it.
All right.
Okay, see you later.
Take care.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Remember, empowerment begins with knowledge. If you enjoyed our time together and want more content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. So stay inspired, stay informed, and until next time, take care of yourself.